I want to tell you about a bridge. I want to tell you about a specific bridge on a specific road, over a specific canal, in a specific province of a country most Americans stopped thinking about in 2011, and that the people who were there have not stopped thinking about for a single day since. The bridge is in Diyala Province, Iraq, approximately 14 kilometers northeast of Bakuba, on a two-lane hardtop road that runs through the town of Khan Bani Saad. The bridge is concrete. It is 41 meters long. It spans an irrigation canal that feeds the farmland south of the town. The bridge has low concrete barriers on either side, approximately 1 meter high, poured in the 1970s by a construction firm under contract to the Ba'athist government, repaired once in 1995, repaired again by the United States Army Corps of Engineers in 2005, and not repaired since. The bridge has no name. It appears on military maps as Bridge 14, grid reference 38 SMB 44712938. It appears on no tourist map because there are no tourists in Khan Bani Saad. And if there were tourists in Khan Bani Saad, they would not visit the bridge because the bridge is not interesting. The bridge is an ordinary concrete span over an irrigation canal on a road in a farming province in a country that has been at war, in one form or another, for most of the last 40 years. I am going to tell you why this bridge matters. I am going to tell you what happened on it and around it, and because of it. On the night of the 14th of April and the morning of the 15th of April, 2008. I am going to tell you about the woman who held it. I am going to take my time. If you are here, be here. If you need to leave, leave now. This one runs long. I will be here when you get back. The woman is Captain Sarah Adair McAllister, United States Marine Corps, Military Occupational Specialty 1802, tank officer. She was, on the 14th of April, 2008, 27 years old, 5 feet 7 inches, 141 pounds without gear, approximately 183 pounds with gear, the commanding officer of a tank platoon. 4 M1A1 Abrams main battle tanks, 16 crew members, attached to 2nd Battalion, 3rd Marines, operating in Diyala Province during what the military was calling the Spring Surge operations, and what the people who were doing the operating were calling the part of 2008 that nobody back home was paying attention to because the election was on and the economy was crashing and Iraq had become, in the language of the news cycle, the war America was tired of. I am going to ask you a question. The question is not the kind of question I usually ask. The question this time is simple, and I am going to answer it at the end, and I want you to hold it while I tell you the rest. The question is, what does it sound like when a 27-year-old woman holds a bridge for 11 hours with 4 tanks and no air support and does not lose a single Marine? What does that sound like? Hold the question. Captain McAllister was born on the 16th of September, 1980, in Oceanside, California, which is the town adjacent to Marine Corps Base Camp Pendleton, which is the town where Marines and their families live, which is the town where Sarah McAllister's father, Gunnery Sergeant Robert McAllister, was stationed at the time of her birth, and where her grandfather, Master Sergeant Angus McAllister, had been stationed 30 years before that, and where her great-grandfather, Corporal Eamon McAllister, had shipped out from in 1942 with the 1st Marine Division for Guadalcanal. There is a photograph of Corporal Eamon McAllister standing in front of the main gate at Camp Pendleton in 1942, in his utility uniform, with his pack, squinting into the California sun. There is a photograph of Master Sergeant Angus McAllister standing in approximately the same spot in 1966, in his utility uniform, without his pack, not squinting because it was overcast. There is a photograph of Gunnery Sergeant Robert McAllister standing in the same spot in 1990, in his utility uniform, with his daughter, who is 10 years old in the photograph, who is standing next to him, who is wearing a t-shirt that says Camp Pendleton Run in yellow letters, who is squinting into the California sun exactly the way her great-grandfather was squinting 48 years earlier. The 3 photographs are in the McAllister family's home in Oceanside. They hang in the hallway between the kitchen and the living room, in chronological order, left to right. Sarah McAllister grew up walking past those photographs every day. She told me, in 2023, that she did not think about the photographs as a child. She said they were part of the wall. She said, "A picture on a wall is not a decision. A picture on a wall is furniture. The decision happened later. The decision happened when I was 17. The decision that happened when she was 17 was this. She was a senior at Oceanside High School. She was a good student. She was, by her own description, a restless student, the kind of student who did well in the subjects that engaged her and did poorly in the subjects that bored her, not because she lacked the capacity, but because she lacked the willingness to perform work she did not respect. She respected history. She respected mathematics. She respected physics. She did not respect the version of English class that asked her to write personal essays about her feelings, because she did not believe her feelings at 17 were interesting enough to warrant the paper. She told me, I was not an introspective teenager. I was a teenager who wanted to drive things. She wanted to drive things. Specifically, she wanted to drive tanks. She had wanted to drive tanks since she was 12 years old, when her father took her to the 29 Palms base for a family day event, and she sat in the driver's seat of an M1A1 Abrams for the first time and put her hands on the lateral sticks and felt the idle vibration of a 1,500 horsepower gas turbine engine come up through the hull into her palms, and she understood, in a way that she told me she has never been able to fully articulate, that the machine was hers. Not that particular machine. The idea of the machine. The mass of it. The purpose of it. The fact that it existed to go somewhere difficult and do something decisive, and that the person who drove it was the person who decided where it went. She was 12. She did not have the vocabulary for what she felt. She had the feeling. The feeling did not leave. At 17, she applied to the United States Naval Academy. She was accepted. Her father drove her to Annapolis in June of 1998. He dropped her off at Alumni Hall for induction day. He did not give a speech. He was not a man who gave speeches. He was a gunnery sergeant who had served 22 years in the Marine Corps and who had been to the Gulf in 91 and to Somalia in 93 and who had raised his daughter in base housing and public schools and who had taught her, by his own account to me in 2023, exactly one thing, which was that the work was the work and that feelings about the work were not the work. He said to her, in the parking lot of Alumni Hall, the following, "Sarah, do the work." He kissed her on the forehead. He got in the car. He drove back to Oceanside. She went inside. She became a midshipman. She graduated from the Naval Academy in 2002 with a degree in mechanical engineering, with a class rank in the top quarter, with a commission as a second lieutenant of Marines, and with orders to the basic school at Quantico. She completed the basic school. She requested and received assignment to the tank officer course, which was at that time conducted at Fort Knox, Kentucky, the Army's armor school, because the Marine Corps did not maintain a separate tank school and sent its tank officers to the Army for initial training. She completed the tank officer course. She was assigned to 1st Tank Battalion at 29 Palms, California. She reported in January of 2003. She was a platoon commander. She had 4 tanks. She was 22 years old. She was, by the account of her company commander at the time, a major named Hector Gutierrez, who I spoke to by phone in 2023, the most mechanically intuitive tank officer Gutierrez had seen in 12 years of service in the tank community. Gutierrez told me, she understood the vehicle. She understood it the way a pilot understands an aircraft. She did not just know the technical manual. She knew the machine. She could hear when a turbine was running 3% above optimal. She could feel when a track was starting to throw. She had the hands. You cannot teach the hands. She had them. She deployed with 1st Tank Battalion to Iraq in March of 2003 for the invasion. She was a platoon commander. She was 22. She crossed the border into Iraq on the 20th of March, 2003, as part of the initial ground assault. Her platoon of 4 M1A1s was attached to Regimental Combat Team 1, 1st Marine Division. She was in combat within the first 72 hours. Her platoon participated in the fight at Nasiriyah on the 23rd of March, 2003, which was the same fight in which PFC Jessica Lynch's convoy was ambushed and in which 18 Marines of Task Force Tarawa were killed, and which was, for a period of several weeks in the spring of 2003, the most closely watched engagement of the war. Her platoon was not in the same sector as the Lynch convoy. Her platoon was on the eastern side of the Euphrates Bridge. Her platoon engaged enemy positions at ranges between 300 and 1,200 meters for approximately 6 hours on the 23rd of March. Her tank fired 14 main gun rounds that day, 12 high explosive and 2 sabot. She was in the commander's hatch for the entire engagement. She was not wounded. None of her crew were wounded. One of her platoon's 4 tanks took an RPG strike on the reactive armor tiles on the left side of the turret. The tiles did their job. The round did not penetrate. The tank continued to fight. After Nasiriyah, her platoon moved north with the division. They participated in the seizure of the Diyala Bridge on the approach to Baghdad. They entered Baghdad on the 9th of April. She was 22 years old, in the commander's hatch of the lead tank in her platoon, crossing the Diyala Bridge into the eastern outskirts of Baghdad. On a day when the temperature was 107 degrees and the turbine exhaust from her own tank added another 30 degrees to the air around the hatch, and she was drinking water from a camelback at a rate of approximately 1 liter per hour and still losing weight from dehydration. She returned from the invasion deployment in September of 2003. She was promoted to first lieutenant. She served a second deployment to Iraq in 2005, this time to Al-Anbar province, during the height of the insurgency, as the executive officer of a tank company. She served a third deployment in 2006 to Ramadi during the Anbar awakening period as a company commander. The call sign. I want to tell you about the call sign now, because the call sign is part of the story, and the call sign has a specific origin that she told me about and that I want you to hear. In Ramadi, in November of 2006, Captain McAllister was commanding a tank company in support of Marine infantry operations in the eastern part of the city. Her company was operating from a forward operating base on the eastern edge of Ramadi. On the morning of the 11th of November, 2006, which was Veterans Day, which was a detail that mattered to no one in Ramadi, a Marine rifle squad from a unit her tanks were supporting was hit by a complex ambush approximately 800 meters from the FOB. 3 Marines were wounded. The rifle squad was pinned. The squad leader radioed for support. Captain McAllister, who was in the FOB's Tactical Operations Center monitoring the radio, heard the call. She assessed the situation. The nearest tank was 7 minutes out on a patrol route. The quick reaction force was being assembled but would take 12 minutes. The wounded Marines were in a position that was deteriorating. She made a decision. She was not in a tank. She was in the TOC. The nearest vehicle to her physical location was a Humvee that was parked inside the FOB's vehicle compound, behind a gate that was, at that moment, closed and locked with a chain because the compound was in a stand-down maintenance cycle. She ran to the Humvee. She got in. The gate was chained. She drove the Humvee through the gate. She did not stop to unlock the chain. She drove through the chain and the gate, bending the gate off one of its hinges, and she drove the Humvee out of the FOB and down the road to the ambush site. She arrived at the ambush site in approximately 4 minutes. She positioned the Humvee as cover for the wounded Marines. She dismounted. She assisted in the casualty treatment. She directed fire. The QRF arrived 8 minutes after she did. The ambush was broken. The wounded Marines were evacuated. All 3 survived. She drove the Humvee back to the FOB. The gate was still hanging off its hinge. The chain was on the ground. The company first sergeant, a man named Torres, whom I have not been able to locate for this project, was standing by the broken gate when she drove back through it. Torres looked at the gate. Torres looked at her. Torres said, according to 3 Marines who were present and who told me the story independently of each other in 2023. Skipper, you wrecked my gate. She said, I will buy you a new gate, First Sergeant. He said, no ma'am, you will not, because I am going to weld this one back together myself, and every time I look at it, I am going to remember what you did with a Humvee on Veterans Day. The company began calling her Wrecker that afternoon. The call sign stayed. It followed her out of Ramadi. It followed her to Diyala. It followed her home. It followed her to the Pentagon. It is, as far as I have been able to determine, still the name the Marines who served with her use when they talk about her, which they do, which is why I know this story, which is why you are hearing it now. I need to tell you about Diyala Province in the spring of 2008, because if I do not tell you about Diyala, you will not understand the bridge, and if you do not understand the bridge, you will not understand what she did. And if you do not understand what she did, you will not understand why I am telling you this story instead of a story with a villain, because this story does not have a villain. This story has a bridge and a woman and 11 hours and the ordinary machinery of a war that was being fought correctly by competent people under conditions that were not anyone's fault. Diyala Province in the spring of 2008 was the place in Iraq that was not Anbar and not Baghdad and not Basra, and therefore was not, in the spring of 2008, the place that anyone in Washington or anyone in the American media was paying attention to. Anbar was the success story. The awakening had worked. Violence in Anbar had dropped by 80%. Baghdad was the surge story. General Petraeus had put 30,000 additional troops into Baghdad, and the sectarian killing had dropped, and the metrics were moving in the right direction, and the briefings were cautiously optimistic. Basra was the crisis story. The Mahdi army was fighting the Iraqi army in the streets of Basra, and the British were pulling back, and the Iranians were supplying weapons in Basra was the thing that kept the generals up at night. Diyala was none of those things. Diyala was the province that was still bad, that had always been bad, that was mixed Sunni and Shia and Kurdish in a way that made every road and every village a potential sectarian fault line, and that was, in the spring of 2008, experiencing a surge of its own, not an American surge of additional troops, but an insurgent surge of additional attacks, as fighters who had been pushed out of Anbar and Baghdad by the awakening and the surge relocated to Diyala, where the American presence was thinner and the terrain was more forgiving and the tribal structures were less consolidated and the opportunities for a determined insurgent group were, in the spring of 2008, significant. 2nd Battalion, 3rd Marines was in Diyala. 2-3 was an infantry battalion operating in the area around Bakuba. Captain McAllister's tank platoon, for M1A1S, was attached to 2-3 as the battalion's direct support armor element. This was her 4th deployment to Iraq. She was 27. She was no longer the young officer who had crossed the border in 2003 with the hands and the instinct and the mechanical intuition. She was the experienced officer who had crossed the border in 2003 and had been to Anbar and Ramadi and had broken a gate with a Humvee and had earned a call sign and had spent, by the spring of 2008, more than 30 cumulative months in Iraq over 4 deployments, which was a number that was unusual even for Marines in that period, and that reflected, in her case, not a failure of the personnel system to rotate her, but her own repeated requests to return. She had requested every deployment. She had volunteered for every deployment. She was asked by her monitor at Manpower in 2007 whether she wanted a non-deployment billet, a staff tour, a break. She said no. She said, I am a tank officer. The tanks are in Iraq. I go where the tanks go. The monitor noted the request. The monitor assigned her to 2-3. Bridge 14 was the only crossing of the irrigation canal on the road between the 2-3 Forward Operating Base, FOB Warhorse, and the company patrol bases south of Khan Bani Saad. The canal was approximately 15 meters wide and 3 meters deep. The water in the canal was, in April, high from the spring irrigation cycle. The banks were steep and muddy. A tank could not ford the canal. A Humvee could not ford the canal. A 7-ton truck could not ford the canal. The bridge was the road. If the bridge was lost, if it was dropped by explosives or blocked or held by a force that could prevent American vehicles from crossing, the supply line to the southern patrol bases was cut. The Marines at those patrol bases would have to be resupplied by helicopter, which was possible but expensive and slow and dependent on aircraft availability that was, in the spring of 2008, severely constrained because every helicopter in theater was being pulled south to support the Basra operation. The bridge mattered. The bridge was not symbolic. The bridge was a concrete logistics fact, 41 meters long, and if it was gone, the supply line was gone and the patrol bases were isolated. On the afternoon of the 14th of April, 2008, the battalion intelligence section at FOB Warhorse received reporting from multiple sources: Iraqi human intelligence assets, signals intercepts, and pattern analysis of recent IED emplacements, indicating that an insurgent force of estimated company strength, 60 to 80 fighters, was massing in the agricultural area south of Khan Bani Saad with the assessed intent of seizing Bridge 14 and holding it long enough to emplace demolition charges and drop the span. The intelligence was assessed as credible. The battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel James Parrish, made the decision to reinforce the bridge. The reinforcement he had available was Captain McAllister's tank platoon, which was at that moment at FOB Warhorse completing a maintenance cycle. Parrish called McAllister to the battalion TOC at 1500. He briefed her. He told her the intelligence. He told her the assessed enemy force. He told her what he wanted her to do, which was to move her 4 tanks to Bridge 14 and hold the bridge until the infantry company that was currently conducting operations north of Bakuba could be redeployed south to relieve her, which would be, by his estimate, first light the following morning. He told her that he could not provide air support because the air assets that would normally be available to 2-3 had been redirected to Basra for the Mahdi Army operation and would not be back for at least 48 hours. He told her that the quick reaction force at Warhorse was a single rifle platoon, 40 Marines, and that the QRF might or might not be available depending on what else happened in the battalion area that night. He told her, in the plainest language a battalion commander uses with a subordinate he trusts, that she was going to be on the bridge with 4 tanks and no air and possibly no QRF for approximately 11 hours, from dusk to dawn, against a force that might outnumber her 4 to 1. She told me, in 2023, what she said to Parrish. She said, "Colonel, I have 4 tanks." He said, "I know." She said, "4 tanks are enough for a bridge." He said, "I know." She said, "I will hold the bridge." He said, "I know you will." She said, "Is there anything else?" He said, "No." She said, "I'm going to go brief my crews." He said, "Wrecker." She stopped. He said, "Call me every hour on the hour. I want to hear your voice every hour." She said, "Yes, sir." She left the TOC. She walked to the motor pool. She briefed her 4 tank commanders. She told them where they were going and what they were doing and what they would not have and how long they would be there. She did not, by the account of her tank commanders, whom I interviewed in 2023, deliver a speech. She delivered information. She told them the grid coordinate of the bridge. She told them the assessed enemy strength. She told them the timeline. She told them the support situation. She told them the ammunition they would carry and the fuel state they needed and the radio frequencies they would use. She told them the relief was coming at first light. She told them that between now and first light the bridge was theirs and nobody was going to take it from them. Staff Sergeant Michael Kaminsky was the tank commander of Tank 2, the second vehicle in the platoon. He was from Erie, Pennsylvania. He was 31 years old. He had been in tanks for 9 years. He had been to Iraq twice before. He told me, in a parking lot outside a Sheetz gas station in Erie, Pennsylvania, in October of 2023, that the briefing Captain McAllister gave in the motor pool that afternoon was the briefing he measures all other briefings against. He said there was no bullshit in it. He said there was no motivation in it. She did not tell us we were warriors. She did not tell us we were going to make history. She told us we were going to a bridge and we were going to sit on it for 11 hours and nobody was going to cross it who was not supposed to cross it, and in the morning we were going to come back. He said that was the whole briefing. He said it was the best briefing I ever received in 9 years of service because it was true, and because she did not add anything to it that was not true, and because the absence of anything extra was the thing that told me she knew exactly what she was doing. He said, when an officer tells you extra things, the officer is nervous. When an officer tells you only the things you need, the officer is ready. She was ready. He said, I knew it from the briefing. I knew it before we moved. They moved at 1700. 4 M1A1 Abrams main battle tanks, 68 tons each, 1,500 horsepower gas turbine engines, 120mm main guns, 50 caliber machine guns on the commander's stations, 762 machine guns in the coaxial and loaders mounts, 3,000 rounds of machine gun ammunition per tank, 40 main gun rounds per tank, for crew members per tank, 16 Marines total. Moving in a column down the road from FOB Warhorse to Bridge 14, a distance of approximately 11 kilometers at a road speed of approximately 30 miles per hour, arriving at the bridge at approximately 1740. The sun in Diyala Province in mid-April sets at approximately 1830. They had 50 minutes of daylight. Captain McAllister positioned her 4 tanks on the bridge and around it in a configuration that she had, by her own account to me, worked out in her head during the 11-kilometer drive from Warhorse. She put Tank 1, her tank, on the near side of the bridge, oriented south, covering the road approach from the direction of the assessed enemy positions. She put Tank 2, Kaminsky's tank, on the far side of the bridge, oriented south, offset to the left of the road, covering the western agricultural area. She put Tank 3, commanded by Sergeant First Class. I am going to use his rank and call him Sergeant Rivera because he has asked me not to use his full name. She put Rivera's tank on the near side, offset to the right, oriented east, covering the canal bank and the date palm groves that ran along the eastern side of the road. She put Tank 4, commanded by a corporal named Davis who was 21 years old and on his first deployment, on the far side of the bridge, oriented north, covering the rear, watching the road back to Warhorse in case the insurgents attempted to cut them off from behind. For tanks. For directions. 1 bridge. The geometry was simple. The geometry was, by the account of every tank commander I spoke to, exactly right. She had placed them so that every approach to the bridge was covered by at least 1 main gun and at least 2 machine guns, and so that no tank was in the line of fire of any other tank, and so that if any one tank was disabled, the other 3 could adjust their fields of fire to cover the gap without moving. She had worked this out in her head in 11 kilometers. She did not draw it on a map. She did not ask for input. She told each tank where to go and each tank went there, and when the 4 tanks were in position, she got on the radio, and she said to all 4 crews simultaneously the following: "This is Wrecker. We are set. Weapons tight until I call weapons free. Nobody fires until I say, acknowledge." 4 acknowledgements came back. She said, "Good. Stay on the net. I will call Warhorse at 1800. Out." I want to pause here and tell you something about the phrase weapons tight. Weapons tight is a fire control order. It means, do not fire unless you are fired upon, or unless I specifically authorize you to fire. It is the opposite of weapons free, which means fire at anything you identify as a threat. The distinction matters because the road that crossed Bridge 14 was not exclusively a military road. It was a public road. Iraqi civilians used it. Farmers used it to move equipment and produce to the markets in Khan Bani Saad. Families used it. Children used it. In the 40 minutes between the platoon's arrival at the bridge and sunset, 3 civilian vehicles crossed the bridge. A white Kia Bongo truck carrying bags of cement. A blue sedan carrying a family of 5. A tractor pulling a flatbed trailer loaded with alfalfa bales. Captain McAllister watched each vehicle cross the bridge from her commander's hatch. She did not stop any of them. She did not search any of them. She told me they were civilians using their road. I was the visitor. I was not going to make them prove to me that they had the right to drive on their own road. After sunset, the civilian traffic stopped. After sunset, the bridge belonged to her. 1800. She called Warhorse on the battalion tactical net. She reported her position, her disposition, her ammunition state, her fuel state, her personnel status. All 4 tanks in position. Full ammunition. Fuel at 92%. 16 Marines, all present, all healthy. No enemy contact. She gave the report in approximately 45 seconds. Lieutenant Colonel Parrish acknowledged. He told her the latest intelligence update, which was that the insurgent force was assessed to still be massing south of Khan Bani Saad and had not yet moved toward the bridge. He told her the QRF at Warhorse was on standby, but that there had been an IED strike on a convoy north of Bakuba and the QRF might be diverted. He told her the infantry relief was still tracking for first light, approximately 0530. He told her to call back at 1900. She said, "Roger." She said out. She hung the handset on the bracket inside the turret. She stood in the hatch. She looked south, down the road, into the dusk. 1900. She called Warhorse. No contact. All tanks in position. Fuel at 91%. 16 Marines. Parrish acknowledged. He told her the QRF had been diverted to the IED site north of Bakuba. The QRF was not available. She was on the bridge with 4 tanks and no QRF and no air. She told me, in 2023, that when Parrish told her the QRF was gone, she felt a sensation she described as a door closing. She said it was not fear. Fear is when you do not know what is going to happen. I knew what was going to happen. A force was going to come to the bridge, and I was going to be there with 4 tanks, and that was going to be what I had. A door closed. The room I was in got smaller. The room was, for tanks, 1 bridge, 11 hours. That was the room. I was in the room. The door was closed. I said Roger, and I hung up the handset, and I looked at the road, and I waited. 2000. She called Warhorse. No contact. Fuel at 90%. 16 Marines. She told me. The hardest hour was the one before it started. She said, once it starts, you are in the work. Before it starts, you are in your own head. I do not like being in my own head. I like being in the work. She waited. 2100. She called Warhorse. No contact. 2130. At 2132, Sergeant Rivera, in Tank 3, on the near side of the bridge covering the eastern canal bank, reported movement in the date palm groves approximately 400 meters east of his position. He reported it on the platoon internal net. He said, Wrecker, Tank 3, I have movement in the tree line, for 100 meters east, multiple personnel, moving south to north. She said, Tank 3, Wrecker, can you identify? He said, negative, too dark. I'm on thermals. I count 8 to 10 personnel. They are carrying objects. I cannot identify the objects. She said, Tank 3, weapons tight. Continue to observe. Report any change. She got on the battalion net. She called Warhorse. She reported the contact. Parrish acknowledged. Parrish said, Wrecker, are you requesting anything? She said, negative, sir, I am reporting. He said, Roger, keep reporting. At 2145, Kaminsky, in Tank 2, on the far side of the bridge covering the western agricultural area, reported a second group of personnel, approximately 600 meters southwest of his position, moving through the fields toward the road. He estimated 12 to 15 personnel. He reported objects being carried that were, on the thermal site, consistent with the thermal signature of weapons, long objects at shoulder height, with the heat bloom of a human hand at one end. At 2150, Rivera reported that the first group had stopped moving. They were in the tree line, for 100 meters east, stationary. At 21:52, Kaminsky reported that the second group had also stopped. They were in the field, 600 meters southwest, stationary. Captain McAllister, standing in her hatch, now had two groups of armed personnel, one east and one southwest, both stationary, both within weapons range of the bridge, both positioned in a way that was consistent with the early stages of a coordinated attack. One group to fix, one group to assault. She told me. I knew what they were doing. I had seen it before. In Ramadi, in Anbar, they were setting up. They were going to hit us from two directions, and they were going to try to overwhelm us with RPGs and get close enough to the bridge to put charges on it. I had seen this pattern. The pattern is fix with fire from one direction, assault from the other, get to the objective. The pattern works against infantry. The pattern works against Humvees. The pattern does not work against tanks. They did not know we were tanks. They knew there were vehicles on the bridge. They did not know the vehicles were 68-ton main battle tanks with 120mm guns. They were about to find out. At 22:04, the first RPG was fired from the tree line to the east. It struck the concrete barrier on the near side of the bridge, approximately 15 meters from Rivera's tank. The explosion was loud. The fragmentation pattern was wide. No one was hit. The tank was not damaged. Rivera reported, contact, RPG, east, 400 meters. McAllister said, weapons free. She said it once. She said it clearly. She said it without raising her voice. Kaminsky told me. She said weapons free the way you say past the salt. That is the voice. That is what you want to hear from your commander when the first round comes in. You want to hear past the salt. You do not want to hear someone who has just discovered they are in combat. You want to hear someone who knew they were in combat 30 minutes ago and has been waiting for the work to start. That is what she sounded like. She sounded like the work was starting. Rivera engaged the tree line with his coaxial 7.62 machine gun, firing in controlled bursts at the thermal signatures in the palm grove. Kaminsky traversed his turret to cover the southwestern group, which had begun to move toward the road at a run. McAllister's tank, Tank 1, engaged the southwestern group with its 50 caliber machine gun, firing over the bridge, over Kaminsky's turret, into the field at a range of approximately 500 meters. Davis, in Tank 4, covering the rear, reported no contact to the north. McAllister told Davis, stay where you are. Keep watching the road. Do not turn around. Davis said, Roger. The first engagement lasted approximately 12 minutes. The eastern group fired 4 RPGs from the tree line. All 4 struck either the concrete bridge barriers or the ground near the tanks. None hit a tank directly. Rivera's coaxial gun put sustained fire into the tree line. At approximately 22:16, the eastern group stopped firing and withdrew deeper into the palm groves. The southwestern group, which had been advancing toward the road, went to ground in an irrigation ditch approximately 300 meters from Kaminsky's position when McAllister's 50 caliber opened up. They stayed in the ditch. They did not advance further. They did not withdraw. They were in the ditch, 300 meters out, and they stayed there. 22:20. McAllister called Warhorse. She reported the contact. She reported ammunition expenditure. Approximately 800 rounds of 7.62, approximately 120 rounds of 50 caliber. No main gun rounds expended. No casualties. No damage to any tank. Parrish acknowledged. He said, QRF is still on the IED site. I do not have anything to send you. She said, I do not need anything. She said, they are going to come again. She said, I will call you at 2300. She told me, the first contact was a probe. They wanted to know what we had. Now they knew. They knew we had machine guns. They did not yet know we had main guns. I did not fire a main gun round in the first contact because I did not need to. I was saving the main gun for when they brought something that a machine gun could not handle. I knew they would bring something. The question was what and when. At 23:10, which was approximately 50 minutes after the first contact ended. Kaminsky reported that the group in the irrigation ditch, 300 meters southwest, was moving again. They were not moving toward the bridge. They were moving laterally, to the west, along the ditch, toward a point where the ditch intersected another irrigation channel that ran north toward the road. He assessed that they were attempting to flank his position, to get north of him, to get between him and the bridge. McAllister told Kaminsky to let them move. She told Kaminsky, "I want them to think they are getting around you." She repositioned Tank 3, Rivera's tank, pulling it back 30 meters from its original position and reorienting it to cover the northern approach along the irrigation channel. She did this by voice, on the radio, in approximately 4 sentences. She told Rivera the compass bearing and the range fan she wanted him to cover. Rivera moved his tank. The repositioning took less than 2 minutes. Now, if the flanking group came north along the irrigation channel, they would walk into Rivera's field of fire at a range of approximately 200 meters, with nowhere to go because the channel was a straight line with steep mud banks on either side. She had turned the terrain into a funnel. She had done it in 4 sentences and 2 minutes. At 23:28, a vehicle was observed approaching from the south on the main road. McAllister saw it on her thermal sight. It was a truck, a large truck. It was moving at approximately 40 miles per hour, which was fast for that road at night. It was not using headlights. She told me, when a truck comes at you at night with no lights, at speed, on a road you are defending, you have approximately 4 seconds to decide whether it is a VBIED or a civilian. A VBIED is a vehicle-borne improvised explosive device. A car bomb. A truck bomb. The insurgents in Diyala had been using VBIEDs throughout the spring of 2008. A VBIED driven into the bridge at speed could, depending on the charge, damage or destroy the span. A VBIED was the one thing that could accomplish what the infantry assault had not. It could take the bridge. She had 4 seconds. She told me what she thought in those 4 seconds. She thought, the truck is dark, no lights. The truck is fast. The truck is on the road. The road has been empty of civilian traffic since sunset. The assessed enemy wants to destroy this bridge. A VBIED is consistent with the intelligence. If I fire the main gun at this truck and it is a VBIED, the truck will detonate 300 meters from my position and nobody will be hurt. If I fire the main gun at this truck and it is not a VBIED, if it is a civilian truck, if it is a farmer who is driving home late without his headlights because his headlights are broken, which happens on these roads, which happens in this country, if it is a man driving home to his family, then I will have killed a civilian, and I will have killed him because I was afraid, and I will carry that for the rest of my life. For seconds, she told me. In 4 seconds, I did the following math. I looked at the truck through the thermal sight. I saw 1 thermal signature in the cab. 1 person. I saw the bed of the truck. The bed was empty. If it was a VBIED, the bed would be loaded. The bed would have a thermal signature consistent with a large mass, bags of fertilizer, propane tanks, artillery shells, whatever the charge was. The bed was empty. The bed was flat and cool on the thermal. 1 person in the cab. Empty bed. Moving fast. No lights. I did not fire. I told all tanks, weapons tight, do not engage the vehicle. I let the truck come. The truck reached the bridge. The truck crossed the bridge. The truck passed Tank 1, McAllister's tank, at a distance of approximately 8 meters. She was standing in the hatch. She could see the driver through the windshield in the ambient light. It was a man. He was approximately 50 years old. He was alone. He was driving fast because the road was dangerous at night and he wanted to get home. His headlights were off because he had seen the tanks and he was afraid that if he drew attention to himself, he would be shot. He crossed the bridge. He continued north on the road, past Davis in Tank 4. He disappeared into the darkness toward Khan Bani Saad. He went home. He does not know that a 27-year-old woman in the hatch of a tank had his life in her hands for 4 seconds and gave it back to him because the bed of his truck was empty. He does not know her name. He does not know her call sign. He went home. I think about him sometimes. I think about the distance between a man going home to his family and a man not going home to his family, and how that distance was 4 seconds and a thermal sight and a woman who did the math instead of pulling the trigger. She called Warhorse at 2300. She reported the truck. She reported the flanking movement to the west. She reported that the eastern group had withdrawn but was likely still in the palm groves. She reported ammunition state. She reported fuel state. 87%. Parrish said, "Roger." He said, "The QRF is back at Warhorse. The QRF is available. Do you want the QRF?" She said, "Negative, sir. Keep the QRF. I may need it later. I do not need it now." Parrish said, "Wrecker, I am offering you 40 Marines." She said, "Sir, I have 4 tanks. 40 Marines on foot at this bridge at night will be 40 Marines I have to worry about not shooting. I do not want infantry on this bridge tonight. I want my tanks. Keep the QRF." She told me, in 2023, infantry at night on a bridge that tanks are defending is a fratricide problem. My tanks were the weapon. Adding infantry would not have made me stronger. It would have made me more complicated. I do not like complicated at midnight. I like simple at midnight. For tanks is simple. She declined the QRF. Parrish accepted her decision. At 2340, the flanking group that had been moving through the irrigation ditch reached the point where the ditch met the north-south irrigation channel. They turned north. They began moving up the channel toward the road. They were moving in a file, one behind the other, in the channel, between the mud banks, toward Rivera's tank, which was oriented directly down the channel at a range that was decreasing from 300 meters to 250 to 200. Rivera reported the movement. McAllister said, "Tank 3, let them come to 150 meters. At 150 meters, fire the cokes. Do not fire the main gun." Rivera said, "Roger." At 153 meters, by the rangefinder on Rivera's thermal sight, Rivera opened fire with the coaxial 762 machine gun. He fired in long bursts directly down the channel. The effect was immediate and severe. The fighters in the channel had no cover. The mud banks that had concealed their movement from the flanks now trapped them in a straight line of fire. Rivera fired for approximately 30 seconds. The fighters who were able to turned and ran south in the channel. Rivera ceased fire. He reported, "Contact broken, multiple enemy casualties in the channel, remaining personnel withdrawing south." McAllister said, "Tank 3, good work. Resume your position. Cover the east. I want to stop here and tell you what Rivera told me in 2023. Rivera is retired now. He lives in Yuma, Arizona. He works for a company that installs solar panels. He has 2 daughters. He told me on the phone, because he would not meet me in person, he told me on the phone that the channel engagement was the engagement he thinks about most from his time in Iraq. He said, "I do not think about it because of the killing. I think about it because of the position. She put me in a position where my tank was the right weapon at the right range on the right axis. She did that with 4 sentences on the radio. She turned a mud ditch into a kill zone. That was not luck. That was a tank officer who understood terrain and fire in time." He said, "I have worked in solar panels for 8 years now. We lay panels in straight lines across open ground. Every time I walk a site, I think about lines of fire. I think about the channel. I think about her voice on the radio telling me, 'Tank 3, let them come to 150 meters.' That is the voice that is in my head when I make decisions. It has been in my head for 15 years. I do not think it is leaving." At midnight, she called Warhorse. She reported the channel engagement. She reported estimated enemy casualties. She reported ammunition state. Approximately 60% of machine gun ammunition remaining. All main gun rounds remaining. Fuel at 84%. No friendly casualties. No damage to any vehicle. Parrish said, "Roger." He said, "Relief is still tracking 0530. 5.5 hours. She said, "Roger." Between midnight and 0100, there was no contact. The bridge was quiet. The road was empty. The canal water moved beneath the bridge in the darkness. The 4 tanks sat in their positions, engines idling, turbines humming at the low, steady pitch that an M1A1 produces at idle, which is a sound that Marines who have served in tanks describe as a sound you feel more than hear, a vibration in the hull that comes up through the seat and into your spine, and that becomes, over a long night in a stationary position, indistinguishable from your own pulse. She was standing in the hatch. She had been standing in the hatch for 6 hours. Her legs were stiff. Her back was sore. Her eyes were adapted to the dark, but the thermal sight was giving her a headache from the constant green glow. She told me, "I was tired, but I was not sleepy. There is a difference. Tired is your body. Sleepy is your brain. My body was tired. My brain was in the work. My brain was not going to sleep because my brain understood that the bridge was not yet held. The bridge would be held at 05:30 when the infantry arrived. Until 05:30, the bridge was being held. Being held is a continuous present tense. You do not hold a bridge in the past tense until the thing that replaces you arrives. I was in the continuous present tense. I was holding. At 01:12, Davis, in Tank 4, covering the rear, the 21-year-old corporal on his first deployment, reported a contact to the north. He reported 2 vehicles approaching from the direction of Khan Bani Saad, moving south on the road toward the bridge, no headlights, moderate speed. This was the thing she had put Davis in the rear to watch for. This was the encirclement. The insurgents had sent a blocking force north of the bridge while the main force attacked from the south and east. If the blocking force could get onto the road between the bridge and Warhorse, the platoon was cut off. McAllister told Davis, "Tank 4, can you identify the vehicles?" Davis said, "2 trucks, medium size. I see personnel in the beds. I count." He paused. "I count approximately 8 to 10 personnel per truck." She said, "Tank 4, weapons tight. Let them close to 500 meters, then illuminate with your spotlight and give them 1 verbal warning on the loudspeaker. If they continue to advance after the warning, you are weapons free." I want to tell you about Corporal Davis. Davis was 21 years old. He was from Tulsa, Oklahoma. He had enlisted at 18. He had gone to tank school. He had been assigned to the platoon 6 months before the deployment. He had never been in combat. He had never fired his tank's weapons at a human being. He was in the rear tank, covering the road, and 2 trucks full of armed men were driving toward him in the dark, and his commanding officer had just told him to turn on his spotlight and shout at them, and then, if they kept coming, kill them. He was 21. He told me, in 2023, in the living room of his apartment in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, where he now works as an electrician, "I was scared. I will tell you that. I was scared. I had never done it before." She knew I had never done it before. She put me in the rear because the rear was where she thought the least action would be. She was protecting me. She put me where she thought I would be safe. But the fight came to me anyway. That is what she told me afterward. She said, "Davis, the fight always comes to you. That is why you have to be ready everywhere." She was right. The fight came to me. At 500 meters, Davis turned on the tank spotlight. The spotlight on an M1A1 Abrams is a xenon arc lamp mounted on the turret, and when it activates at night at close range it is, by the description of every person I have spoken to who has experienced it, an event approximately equivalent to the sun opening its eye and looking directly at you. The 2 trucks stopped. Davis keyed the loudspeaker, which is an amplified speaker system mounted on the tank's hull. He said, in English and then in the Arabic phrase that all Marines in Diyala were taught, "Stop, do not move, turn around." He said it twice. The trucks sat in the road, in the cone of the spotlight, for approximately 10 seconds. Then the trucks began to reverse. They backed up, turned around on the narrow road, and drove north, away from the bridge, back toward Khan Bani Saad. They did not fire. They did not stop. They left. Davis told me, "I did not have to fire." She knew I might not have to fire. She told me to use the spotlight first because she knew that 2 trucks full of fighters who suddenly see a 68-ton tank with a spotlight on them at 500 meters might decide that this bridge is not worth dying for. She gave them the chance to leave. She gave me the chance to not have to kill anyone on my first night in combat. She did both of those things with one order. He said, I have thought about that order every day for 15 years. He said, she was managing the battle, and she was managing me, and she was managing the enemy, and she was managing all three at the same time with one sentence. Illuminate and warn. That was the sentence. 3 words. He said, I am an electrician. I wire buildings. I make systems that work in the right order. She wired that night like a system. Every connection in the right place. Every load balanced. That is what I learned from her. That is what I have been trying to do for 15 years. Wire things correctly. One connection at a time. At 01:30, she called Warhorse. She reported the northern contact. She reported that the blocking force had withdrawn. She reported that she now assessed the enemy was operating from at least 3 directions, south, east, and north, and that the bridge was the objective and that the enemy was probing for weakness. Parrish said, Do you want the QRF now? She said, Negative. She said, They are testing me. They have tested me from 3 directions, and they have not found a gap. They are going to try once more. They are going to try something bigger. When they try something bigger, that will be the last attempt. If they fail, they will withdraw before dawn because they do not want to be in the open when the sun comes up. She said, I need the QRF to be available for when they try the big one. Do not send the QRF now. Send the QRF when I ask for it. Parrish said, Roger. She was right. At 02:15, the big one came. Kaminsky, in Tank 2, reported a vehicle approaching from the southwest at high speed. A large vehicle, larger than the truck that had crossed the bridge earlier. Kaminsky said, It looks like a dump truck. It was a dump truck. It was a construction dump truck, the kind used to haul gravel and aggregate on Iraqi road projects, with a large steel bed, and the bed was loaded. On the thermal site, the bed was hot. The bed was full of material that was generating a thermal signature consistent with a large mass of mixed material, metal, chemical compound, organic. Bide. A dump truck packed with explosives, driving at the bridge at speed, with no headlights, at 2:15 in the morning. This was not the civilian truck from 4 hours earlier. This was not an old man driving home. This truck had a hot bed on the thermal. This truck was moving at 60 miles per hour. This truck was aimed at the center of the bridge. She did not hesitate. She did not take 4 seconds. She took less than 1. She said, Tank 2, main gun, fire. Kaminsky fired. The 120mm main gun of an M1A1 Abrams fires a high-explosive anti-tank round at a muzzle velocity of approximately 1,700 meters per second. The round crossed the distance between Kaminsky's tank and the dump truck in less than a second. The round struck the dump truck in the engine block. The dump truck detonated. The explosion was, by Kaminsky's description to me, the largest explosion he had witnessed in 3 deployments to Iraq. The fireball rose approximately 60 meters into the air. The pressure wave rocked his tank on its suspension. Debris struck his turret. The sound was a single percussive event that he described as not a sound, but a physical object that hit him in the chest. The dump truck ceased to exist. A crater appeared in the road approximately 250 meters from the bridge. The bridge was not damaged. Kaminsky's tank was not damaged. No one was hurt. She called Warhorse. She said, Wrecker, Bridge 14, VBD destroyed on the south approach, 250 meters from the span, main gun engagement, bridge intact, no casualties. Parrish said, Roger. She said, That was the big one. She said, Send the QRF now. Parrish sent the QRF. The QRF, 40 Marines and Humvees, departed Warhorse at 02:30 and arrived at Bridge 14 at 0300. By the time the QRF arrived, there was no further contact. The insurgent force had withdrawn. The dump truck had been their main effort. The main effort had been destroyed at 250 meters by a single round from a tank that they did not know was there because they had been probing with RPGs and small arms and had never drawn main gun fire until the moment it mattered. She had held the main gun in reserve for 4 hours. She had fought the entire night with machine guns. She had saved the main gun for the thing that the machine gun could not stop. When the thing came, she used the main gun. 1 round. 1 kill. Bridge intact. I want to tell you about the rest of the night, because the rest of the night is part of the story, even though the rest of the night is quiet. From 0300 to 0530, nothing happened. The QRF set up a perimeter on the road. The 4 tanks stayed in their positions. The road was empty. The canal water moved under the bridge. The crater in the road smoked. McAllister stood in her hatch. She called Warhorse every hour. 0300, 0400, 0500. Each call was the same. No contact. Fuel state. Ammunition state. Personnel status. 16 Marines. No casualties. Bridge intact. At 0512, the sky to the east began to lighten. At 0525, the lead vehicles of the infantry relief column appeared on the road from the north. A rifle company, 160 Marines, in armored vehicles, coming south to take the bridge. McAllister watched them approach on the thermal sight. She told me, that was the moment. That was the moment the bridge was held. Not during the fight. Not during the VBIED. The bridge was held when the relief came into view and the bridge was still there. That is when the verb tense changed. From being held to held. I felt it change. I felt the tense shift in my body. My legs went weak. My hands shook for about 30 seconds. I gripped the hatch rim and I waited for it to pass, and it passed. And then I got on the radio and I called the infantry company commander and I said, "Wrecker at Bridge 14. Bridge is intact. I am ready to transfer the position to you. Advise when you are set." He said, "Roger, Wrecker, we are set." She said, "Bridge 14 is yours." He said, "I have the bridge." She said, "Acknowledged." She told her platoon, "All tanks, Wrecker, we are relieved. Form column on the road. We are going home." They drove back to Warhorse in a column. 11 kilometers. 30 miles per hour. They arrived at approximately 0600. They drove through the gate. They parked the tanks in the motor pool. They shut down the engines. The turbines spooled down from their operational pitch to silence. And the silence, after 11 hours of the engine running and the radio crackling and the machine guns firing and the main gun going off once with a sound like the end of the world, the silence was, by Kaminsky's account, the loudest thing he heard that night. They climbed out of the tanks. They stood in the motor pool in the early morning light. They were dirty. They were tired. They were 16 Marines who had held a bridge for 11 hours against a force that had tried from 3 directions and a dump truck full of explosives to take it from them. And they had not lost the bridge, and they had not lost a Marine, and they had expended 1 main gun round. Captain McAllister climbed down from her tank. She stood in the motor pool. Her platoon sergeant, a staff sergeant named Wojcik, whom I was not able to interview for this project because he died in 2019 of pancreatic cancer. Her platoon sergeant approached her in the motor pool and said, according to Kaminsky, who was standing nearby, "Skipper, how are you?" And she said, "I'm hungry, WOJ. What's for breakfast?" Kaminsky told me. That was the sentence. That was the sentence I kept. Not the orders. Not weapons free. Not the main gun command. The sentence I kept was, "I'm hungry, WOJ. What's for breakfast?" Because that sentence was the sentence that told me the night was over. The night was over because our captain was hungry and she wanted breakfast, and the thing she was thinking about was not the bridge and not the VBIED and not the 11 hours. The thing she was thinking about was eggs. He said, "I have that sentence in a box in my head, and I take it out sometimes when I need to remember what it sounds like when the work is done and you are still alive and the thing that matters is breakfast." He said, "That is what command sounds like at 0600. It sounds like eggs." Now I want to tell you about the Bronze Star and the museum and the things that happened after. and then I want to tell you what she is doing now, and then I am going to answer the question. Lieutenant Colonel Parrish submitted Captain McAllister for a Bronze Star with Combat Distinguishing Device for the defense of Bridge 14 on the night of the 14th and 15th of April, 2008. He submitted the paperwork in May of 2008. The Bronze Star was approved. It was not, however, awarded to her until November of 2009, 18 months after the action, because of a backlog in the awards processing system at Headquarters Marine Corps. The backlog was not specific to her case. The backlog affected hundreds of awards across the Marine Corps in that period. The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan had generated a volume of awards recommendations that the processing system was not staffed to handle at the speed the recommendations were being submitted. Her Bronze Star sat in a queue. It moved through the queue at the speed the queue moved. It arrived at her 18 months late. I want to be clear about something. The delay was not malice. The delay was not politics. The delay was not someone deciding that a female tank officer did not deserve a Bronze Star. The delay was a bureaucratic system that was overwhelmed by the volume of a two-front war, and that processed her award at the same speed it processed everyone else's award, which was slowly. I am telling you this because I told you at the beginning that this story does not have a villain, and I meant it. The awards clerk who processed her Bronze Star was not a villain. The awards clerk was a lance corporal or a sergeant sitting at a desk at Headquarters Marine Corps with a stack of awards packages that was taller than he was, and he processed them in the order he received them, and hers came up when it came up, and that was that. I am not angry about the 18 months. She is not angry about the 18 months. She told me, I did not hold the bridge for a Bronze Star. I held the bridge because it was a bridge and I was told to hold it, and I had 4 tanks. The Bronze Star is a piece of metal in a box in a drawer in my apartment. The bridge is in Diyala. I care about the bridge. I do not care about the box. The tank. I want to tell you about the tank. Tank 1, McAllister's tank, the tank she stood in for 11 hours on Bridge 14, was subsequently deployed twice more to Iraq, served in Afghanistan, and was retired from service in 2016 after a maintenance assessment determined that the hull had reached the end of its service life. The tank was selected for display at the National Museum of the Marine Corps in Triangle, Virginia, as part of the museum's exhibit on armored warfare in the global war on terror. The tank was transported to the museum, cleaned, restored to display condition, and installed in the exhibit hall in 2017. There is a plaque next to the tank. The plaque describes the tank's service history. The plaque mentions Iraq. The plaque mentions Afghanistan. The plaque mentions Bridge 14. The plaque does not mention Captain McAllister by name. The plaque refers to the tank's crew and commanding officer in general terms. It says, this tank was commanded by officers and crew of 1st Tank Battalion during multiple combat deployments. She has been to the museum. She went in 2018, the year after the tank was installed. She went with Kaminsky. They drove down from Washington together. They stood in front of the tank. They did not say much. Kaminsky told me. We stood there for about 10 minutes. She put her hand on the hull. She touched the spot where the driver's hatch is, on the front slope. She touched it the way you touch a horse. She said, hello. She said it to the tank. She said hello to the tank. Then she took her hand off the hull, and she said to me, let's get lunch. And we got lunch. He said, she did not mention the plaque. She did not mention that her name was not on it. I do not know if she noticed. I noticed. I am telling you because I noticed. She did not mention it. She has not mentioned it to me since. She has not, to my knowledge, asked the museum to add her name. She has not complained. She has not written a letter. She has not asked anyone to advocate on her behalf. She held the bridge. The tank is in the museum. The plaque does not name her. She prefers it that way, or she does not prefer it, and she has not said so. I do not know which. I know she has not asked for it to be changed. I know Kaminsky noticed. I know I noticed. I know the plaque says what it says. I am going to leave it where it is, because she left it where it is, and it is not my plaque. Now I want to tell you where she is now, and then I am going to tell you about her father, and then I am going to answer the question. Captain Sarah McAllister was promoted to major in 2010. She served a staff tour at Marine Corps Combat Development Command in Quantico, Virginia, from 2010 to 2012. She deployed to Afghanistan in 2012 as the operations officer for an armored task force in Helmand Province. She returned in 2013. She was promoted to lieutenant colonel in 2015. She served as the executive officer of a tank battalion at 29 Palms from 2015 to 2017. She was assigned to the Joint Staff at the Pentagon, J3 Operations Directorate, in 2018. She is there now. She is on the colonel selection list. If she is selected, which her fitness reports and her record suggest she will be one of the first female colonels in the Marine Corps with a combat arms background that includes direct ground combat command. She does not, by her own account, think about the historical significance of this fact. She thinks about the work. The work at the J3 is operational planning. She plans operations. She plans them the way she planned the defense of Bridge 14, which is to say she identifies the terrain, the forces, the time, and the constraints, and she arranges them so that the thing that needs to happen can happen, and then she lets it happen, and then she has breakfast. She lives in Arlington, Virginia, in a one-bedroom apartment near the Pentagon. She lives alone. She has a cat named Turbine, which is a name that she says is not a reference to the M1A1's engine, and that Kaminsky says is absolutely a reference to the M1A1's engine, and that I am going to let the reader decide. She runs 4 miles every morning before work. She does not talk about Iraq at work unless the work requires it. She does not have the photographs from the McAllister family hallway in her apartment. The photographs are still in her parents' home in Oceanside. There is a 4th photograph in the hallway now, next to the 3 I described earlier, which her father hung in 2009. The 4th photograph is of Captain Sarah McAllister standing in the commander's hatch of Tank 1 at FOB Warhorse, in her tanker's coveralls, with her goggles on her forehead, with the Diyala dust on her face, squinting into the sun. The photograph was taken by a combat photographer who was embedded with 2-3 in the spring of 2008. The photograph was taken 3 days after Bridge 14. She did not know the photograph was being taken. She was looking at something off to the left of the camera. She is squinting. She is squinting the way her great-grandfather was squinting at Camp Pendleton in 1942. The resemblance is, by her father's account, exact. He told me, it is the same squint. It is the McAllister squint. It means the sun is in your eyes, and you are not going to move out of it because you are where you need to be. He hung the photograph in the hallway without telling her. She saw it the next time she came home to Oceanside. She did not say anything about it. She looked at it. She looked at the other 3. She looked at the 4 photographs in a row. Eamon, Angus, Robert, Sarah, 1942 to 2008, 66 years, for Marines, 1 hallway, 1 squint, and she went into the kitchen and she helped her mother with dinner. Her father, Gunnery Sergeant Robert McAllister, retired. I spoke to him in Oceanside in November of 2023. He is 73 years old. He is in good health. He mows his own lawn. He drives a 1997 Toyota Tacoma with 261,000 miles on it that he maintains himself in his garage using a set of tools that his father, Master Sergeant Angus McAllister, gave him in 1978, some of which his father received from his father, Corporal Eamon McAllister, who bought them at a hardware store in Oceanside in 1946 after he came home from the Pacific. Robert McAllister maintains his truck with his grandfather's tools. I asked him if he was proud of his daughter. He looked at me for a long time. He is a man who looks at you for a long time before he answers a question. He said, "Proud is a word that civilians use." He said, "I do not use the word proud. I use the word satisfied." He said, "I am satisfied that she did the work." He said, "The work was the bridge. She did the bridge. The bridge is in Diyala. The bridge is still there. That is the work. I am satisfied. He said, my father's father fought on Guadalcanal. He came home. He was satisfied. My father fought in Vietnam. He came home. He was satisfied. I went to the Gulf and to Somalia. I came home. I was satisfied. My daughter went to Iraq 4 times and to Afghanistan once, and she came home. She is satisfied. That is the family. That is what we do. He said, I do not have a speech. I have never had a speech. The work is the work. He said, she did the work. I asked him if he had ever told her he was proud of her. He said, no. I asked him why not. He said, because she does not need to hear it from me. She knows what she did. I know what she did. She does not need me to tell her. He said, I told her one thing in 1998 in the parking lot at Annapolis. I told her, do the work. She did the work. The work answers the question. The work is the answer. I do not need to add to it. He said, you are a stranger to me. I am telling you these things because she said it was all right to talk to you. If she had said no, I would not be talking to you. She said yes. I am talking. He said, when we are done talking, I am going to go fix the carburetor on the truck. The truck does not need me to feel proud of it. The truck needs me to fix the carburetor. That is the relationship. He said, that is the relationship I have with my daughter also. The relationship is do the work. Fix the thing. Hold the bridge. Come home. He said, that is enough. That is the whole thing. I sat with him for a while after that. We did not say much. His wife, Mrs. McAllister, who is Sarah's mother, who is named Catherine, who was a public school nurse in Oceanside for 31 years, brought us coffee. The coffee was in mugs that had the eagle, globe, and anchor on them. The mugs were old. The paint was chipped. The mugs had been in the kitchen since the 1980s. We drank the coffee. He did not say anything else about his daughter. When I left, he walked me to my car. He shook my hand. He said, tell the story right. He said, do not make it bigger than it is. He said, it is a bridge. He said, she held a bridge. That is enough. Do not make it more than that. I said, yes, sir. I said, I will tell it the way you said. He said, good. He went back into the house. I drove away. I drove past the gate at Camp Pendleton, where the photographs in the hallway were taken, where 4 generations of McAllisters have been photographed in their utility uniforms, squinting into the California sun. The gate was the same gate. The sun was the same sun. The squint was the same squint. The work was the work. Now I am going to answer the question. The question I asked you at the beginning. The question was, what does it sound like when a 27-year-old woman holds a bridge for 11 hours with 4 tanks and no air support and does not lose a single Marine? What does that sound like? I have given you the materials to answer the question. I have given you the radio calls. I have given you Kaminsky's voice and Rivera's voice and Davis's voice and her father's voice. I have given you weapons free. I have given you Tank 3. Let them come to 150 meters. I have given you Illuminate and Warn. I have given you Tank 2, Main Gun, Fire. I have given you, at 0600 in the motor pool, after the night was done, I'm hungry, WOJ. What's for breakfast? The answer to the question is, it sounds like that. It sounds like a series of short, correct sentences spoken in a voice that does not rise. It sounds like Pass the Salt. It sounds like the work. It does not sound like a movie. It does not sound like a speech. It does not sound like a hero. It sounds like a competent 27-year-old woman in a hatch with a radio and 4 tanks, telling 16 Marines what to do, in the order they need to do it, for as long as it takes, until the relief comes, until the bridge is held, until breakfast. Some stories do not need a villain. Some stories are about the bridge and the woman and the 11 hours. Some women just do the work. I have a son. His name is Ethan. He is a captain in the Marine Corps. He is 29 years old. He has been to Afghanistan once and to a place I am not going to name once. He calls me on Sundays when he can. When he calls, his voice on the phone has a quality that I recognized the first time I heard it after his first deployment, and that I have heard in his voice every Sunday since. The quality is short sentences, information without ornament. The question, did you eat? The answer, yes, Pop. The question, are you sleeping? The answer, enough. The question, are you all right? The answer, I am all right. That is the conversation. That is the voice of a captain who has been alone with a radio and a unit and a piece of terrain. I know that voice. I know it because I had it once myself, a long time ago, in a place I do not talk about. I know it because my father had it, in his way, after Korea. I know it because Sarah McAllister had it on the radio at Bridge 14 on the night of the 14th of April 2008. The voice is the same voice. The voice does not change. The voice is the sound the work makes when it is being done correctly by someone who is alone and knows they are alone and is not afraid of being alone because the work is the company they keep. That is what it sounded like. That is what she sounded like. That is what my son sounds like on Sunday mornings. That is what the McAllister hallway sounds like. For photographs deep, 66 years long, one squint, one gate, one son. That is what the bridge sounded like. The bridge is in Diyala. The bridge is still there. The plaque on the tank does not name her. She prefers it that way, or she has not said she does not. I do not know which. I am leaving it where she left it. Stand watch with me a minute. That is all this is. I will be back next week with another one. Bring someone.